Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft blog, a live stream. Rob Staton, Robbie Williams, Adam Nathan with us. We have to say, we've already been saying this off air, but congratulations to Adam again. He has a newborn and he's very generously donating some of his time to us today to talk Seahawks, but I believe he's got a reason to do it. I think he's got a bone to pick with me. He's threatened to call me out on something. I'm very much looking forward to hearing that later. But guys, you know, we've had a mock game since you and I last talked, Robbie. We are approaching the first preseason game, which I'm looking forward to watching, which was not the case last year. And it kind of feels a little bit like this quarterback battle took a bit of a turn at the weekend with Drew Lock performing slightly better. Robbie, when we were talking last week, I got the feeling it was very much I personally, if you'd have asked me last week, I would have said I am concerned that Geno Smith has already been appointed as the starter. I've got a slightly different feel about the whole situation this week, but how are you feeling about it all the week on?
Yeah, I mean, it was nice to see some positive reviews come out about Drew Lock and the way he played, and I really enjoyed, Curtis Allen's write-up on your blog, Rob, about how well he played and those kind of things. I'm trying to temper back expectations or anything yet. I'd like to see, I'd like to see how they play in actual preseason games, but hopefully this gives Locke an opportunity to run with the ones a little bit more. From the sounds of it, like you said, it seems like it's been Geno's job to lose, and he's been running with the ones pretty much all training camp. So it'll be nice to see maybe if he gets some more reps, because I think it would benefit the Seahawks to see what they got in Locke instead of just letting Geno play, because like we said last week, we know what we have in him.
Now, I get it. I've got a feeling Adam's ready to unleash some thoughts. So I will just give you my quick take on this before we invite him in to share those thoughts. My position's changed a little bit. I think they're playing a long game now. And I think what they really want, in my opinion, Drew Lock to earn this job if he's going to get it. I think what they are hoping is that over the course of 2 preseason games and this mock game, that he would separate himself from Geno Smith before they start giving him number 1 reps, before they move him up on a depth chart. I think they want him to do what Russell Wilson did, which is be essentially the number 2 or the number 3 early in training camp, and then play well in preseason game 1, which is what Wilson did against Tennessee. Play even better against Denver in week 2, which is what Wilson did. And then by Kansas City in the 3rd preseason game, he was starting and he was announced as the starter after that for the first regular season game. I think that's what they're hoping for Drew Lock here, that he will, in the number 2 against Pittsburgh, in the 2nd preseason game, he could be the number 1 if he totally blows Geno Smith away this weekend. If not, it will go to that 3rd preseason game, and that's kind of the time frame we're looking at. I don't think it will happen earlier than that. So I think any talk, and I was guilty of this as well, of kind of anticipating that Geno Smith has already won this job, I think is massively premature. And I know a lot of the media are talking about it. Mike Florio has been saying that he thinks Carroll is determined to essentially beat Russell Wilson with Geno Smith. I don't think that we're at that stage yet of Geno Smith having got this job. I think this is a case of the Seahawks really want Drew Lock to win it, not be given it, not be kind of just shoehorned in because he's younger and maybe he's got more upside. I think they want him to genuinely win the gig. So I think that's going to take a couple of weeks to find out whether he can do that or not. Over to you, Adam Nathan. What is your feeling on this?
Well, this isn't where I'm going to necessarily have a go at you, or not even have a go, but maybe just disagree slightly with some of the stuff that you've been forecasting about the season. But I have a hunch that Geno is much more popular in the locker room and with the guys in the team in general than has ever been let on. And in a strange way, I kind of feel like he's got more of an advantage over Drew Lock right now than Flynn ever had over Russell Wilson 10 years ago. I have a feeling that there's a lot of guys in that locker room that want Geno Smith to play and would be quite pissed off if he didn't. I think he's very much one of the guys, much more than Russell Wilson ever was. And actually, I think there was a little bit that of an inkling that we saw in that when he played a few games last year. There were people that were really rooting for him to do well, and you've had KJ Wright say certain things. I don't think that came from nowhere. I don't think that was just him, guessing. I think he's very much read the room there, and I think Drew Lock would have to be probably better than he's ever played in preseason, and Geno would have to be even more of an unmitigated disaster than I think he will be in order to not start the Denver game. I just have a feeling that Geno Smith's name is pretty much ironed in for that Denver game, but the leash is shortening. And I think that's probably the best we can hope for in terms of that.
See, I think if Locke genuinely plays better than Geno Smith in the preseason games, I don't think that the Seahawks are going to hold back and they'll make the change. And I think the point that you make, Adam, is quite important. Sorry, I've just read something and I have to address this. Oh, I thought it said Maverick so bad, and it says Maverick so sad. I don't know. If I see the word Maverick now, I feel obliged to defend Top Gun Maverick. So go see Top Gun Maverick. Anyway, that was a throat clearing that I didn't expect. Back to the point. I think that the point you make, Adam, about the locker room being behind Geno Smith is another reason why Drew Lock's going to win this job. Because if he doesn't clearly separate himself from Smith, how can you sort of sell it to your teammates, to the teammates of Geno Smith? But if he clearly outperforms him, and just looking at the raw numbers and, reading what Curtis said and what people on Twitter have said, and in fairness too, some of the Seattle journalists, they haven't hedged the bets after that mock game. They have come out and said Drew Lock won that game. They have not skirted the issue or played devil's advocate. They have said Drew Lock won that occasion. If that happens against Pittsburgh and I can't remember the playing in the second game. If they plays well against Pittsburgh and in the second game and Geno Smith does not, I think they will turn it over to Drew Lock. And I think the teammates in that case will be more prepared to go with that. But I think that's what he's going to have to do. And if there's not much between the two of them, Robbie, I think it probably will be Geno Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I can see, Adam's point to that and your point as well, Rob. I have a hard time believing that they would just give the job to someone just because he's liked better in the team. I would hope that they make it a fair competition and give the guys an opportunity to go out and actually compete. But there's something to be said that, Geno came in, he's been around the team. He knows the playbook better. There's things about that make him, the legit, lead for starting right out the gate. But I mean, give an opportunity to Drew Lock to be able to compete and show that he's worthy of the job. But you're right, he has to earn the job. I think both of them have to. I think it's silly that Geno would be just given the keys of the kingdom just because he's been there and the guys like him. I feel like that he has to earn it as well. And if he comes out and plays poorly, which I mean, listen, I don't want to beat down on him too much, but we're talking about Drew Lock and Geno Smith. Neither of them are going to come out and light the world on fire. So, it's better to see just kind of who's going to play the best out of the two of them. And I have a feeling we're going to see probably both of them playing throughout the season at some point, would be my guess.
And here's another thing we have to remember here is if Pete Carroll, and I think he's a creature of almost experience a little bit, and I think he is trying to create the same kind of competition and setup that they had in 2012, even though it's a very different situation because they don't obviously have a great rookie quarterback. But Russell Wilson was not the most popular quarterback in that QB competition in 2012, and they went with him. It would have been much easier for them to go with Matt Flynn, who, the Doug Baldwins and the key members of the Legion of Boom were fully prepared to go with. They, I think it's fair to say, anticipated that with rookie growing pains, they might waste a year. And early in the year, it took until the Chicago road win for them to really feel like we can buy in behind Russell Wilson now. And even then, as we've come to learn, there was always a little bit of something there between those individuals and Russell Wilson. They never truly had full faith in him. So even if Smith is the most popular member of the locker room, I think Carroll will be prepared. He's shown he's prepared to go in a different direction, but we'll see if it happens. I'm just really fascinated, Adam, because we've not had you on a stream. We've only done a couple of streams since, training camp. I want to know what your take is. How you feel about the team. I want you to have your say that you were eager to have. I want you to sort of give an Adam Nathan take on the state of the Seahawks.
Oh, I hope like an Adam Nathan take isn't now this kind of thing of, well, he's going to say something, to get the people talking. I'd like to think, hopefully I call it as I see it. And if I get it right or wrong, that is what it is. I'm surprised in your attitude towards this season, Rob. And maybe it's because I've, gone through quite a big life moment that perhaps I'm getting a bit more existential, but I'm quite amazed at how happy people are to just kind of take a year off of it mattering and caring. I find that sports give such tremendous comfort and can give such emotional highs and lows when you think there's a chance of winning. And we've been blessed to have that for 10 years that I if they changed the head coach and lost the quarterback, then I think you could probably say, look, they're going to have to rebuild here. They have to reset because everything, we're starting from square one here. I personally don't accept that a regime that's in year 11, year 12 now is basically going to have to punt a year because they didn't have a succession plan in place. I mean, I don't think it was outlandish to think that Russell Wilson wasn't going to be here this season. There were a lot of people on the Seahawks beat that maybe had a vested interest in being quite aggressive to people that even had the temerity to suggest that Wilson would be traded. But I think if you look back for 2 or 3 years, maybe since that Dallas playoff game, it's not a huge surprise that Wilson's not here anymore. And for there to be nothing behind him other than Geno Smith, who has basically been a meme of a quarterback for the majority of his career, and Drew Lock, who basically is in the team because he had 4 good games 3 years ago, for me, that's not acceptable. And yeah, we've probably been spoiled by the competitiveness that the team have had. And actually, it's funny because we've probably bemoaned the fact that they've not been competitive enough for us, given where they should be with the talent, the money, the quarterback. I find it quite surprising that people are just so happy to say, well, we'll just build for next year. Because God knows, think how different your life can be in a year. I know that's a bit of an over dramatic thing to say about sport, but I don't know, the idea that I have to wait a year or 2 years to see my team win again, I don't accept that in year 12 of a project. I think they're being given a tremendously long leash and amount of respect that perhaps they don't deserve given where we've been.
Well, I agree with you, Adam, on that. Sorry, Rob, if you real fast. I agree with you on that as far as the aspect of having, year 12, not having that be an acceptable answer for the way the direction. But I feel like also you take a step back and you think we haven't really won anything in the last 6 years. We won 1 playoff game in the last 5. I mean, like you said, it hasn't been good enough. And now it's like we need to do something else. And man, sorry, I just looked at the comments again. We're getting all sorts of fun things. Just to take a step back and have something to kind of like look forward to for the future now, instead of just being like, well, here we are with the same team, running the same scheme, running the same offense, same defense, same coordinators. Now we're going to go out and do the same thing. And we're going to, maybe we'll win an extra game this year and actually capture the NFC West, but we're going to lose in the first round of the Rams again. I don't know. That for me, that's like that's why one of the reasons I'm excited to see us go forward and maybe try something a little bit different. But you're right, that as far as the coaching staff goes, they've been given a long leash of being able to kind of do whatever they want.
It's a benefit of the doubt thing for me as well. Like the idea that, I mean, how many times have you heard, again, sorry, Rob, I know this is sort of your turn, but how many times have you heard, well, look, now Pete and John have been here before. They've done this before. Building from the bottom up. But for me, surely it's easier to build on an immense amount of elite Hall of Fame talent. I kind of with this idea that, well, now they've got no good players. Now this is their time to shine is quite a weird way to look at it, given the fact that they couldn't really get over the line when they had probably 7 or 8 potential Hall of Famers and build around that. If they couldn't build around that, isn't it a bit generous to think they can build around Cody Barton and Sidney Jones?
Okay, I think there's a lot of things to unpack with that. This is a very interesting talking point. Before I sort of give some of the response and then let you guys react to the first bit of it, super chat away if you want to join in the debate. Send in a super chat. We will come to those very, very quickly. We appreciate all of the support that the channel gets. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well. So I think this all starts with the ownership situation. We all know by now there's been enough reports, mainly from the Oregon side of things, that the Trailblazers and the Seahawks are going to be sold at some point, because that is part of Paul Allen's will, is that the teams are sold after a set period of time and the money goes towards Paul's philanthropy. And that's what's going to happen. And it just so happens that the Pete Carroll contract, which was signed after Paul's death and Jody had taken over, almost perfectly aligns with the timescale we're talking about here, where Pete Carroll's contract will expire at about the time it's realistic to expect the Seahawks are going to be sold. So that's the first thing to think of. I think that is why Pete Carroll is still with his team. I think if a new ownership was in charge, or even if Paul Allen was in charge, we may well have seen a change, and Russell Wilson might be here. I've heard other people suggest that if Paul Allen was here, he probably would have traded Russell Wilson 12 months ago and said, if you don't want to be here, don't be here. But I don't know. We'll never know. We'll never know because Paul's not here to sort of clear that up for us. So that, if we sort of just accept that as an unfortunate situation for those of us who wanted change, and I was one of those people, Carroll probably isn't going anywhere until this team's sold. I don't think Jody Allen has the stomach for a coaching search and a GM search, and she's just going to let the team carry on with the people who've been here for a decade until ultimately she's no longer making the calls. That would be my prediction of that. If we accept that first and foremost, then we also have to accept that it was inevitable that Russell Wilson was going to go, because Wilson was not going to stay with Pete Carroll. As much as I wanted Jody Allen to make a decision that I now don't think she ever would have made, I think that was, it was one or the other, and it's Carroll. So Wilson goes on. The minute you trade Russell Wilson, and even if they had a much better roster than they had, the minute you trade Russell Wilson, you accept that you are going to have to take some kind of a step back, unless you can immediately, let's say that they had, what pick did they end up with? Like the 10th overall pick that they gave away to the Jets for Jamal Adams. Let's say that they were there and a great quarterback just happened, a Josh Allen type happened to be there, or a Patrick Mahomes, and they drafted him and he was looking great in camp. Short of that situation, or an amazing veteran being available, it would have been very hard for them to put a team on the field this year that you felt really, I can't wait for the season. This is going to be massively competitive. I think the moment they traded Wilson, sort of the realist in me was like, well, look, this is the situation with the team. Complaining about it isn't going to change it. I've got to sort of, for my own enjoyment and for the purpose of the blog, I've got to turn a page and go, okay, what's next? And what's next is a rebuild. And I don't think you can rebuild from something as titanic as trading Wilson in one off season. And as it happens, I don't know whether through sheer luck or coincidence, there are some quarterbacks in the next draft that are interesting. And it's coincidence, or even they may have planned it. I don't know. But if they are looking at that and saying, okay, we're going to use this year to build, and then next year we can draft a great quarterback, and I think there are some potentially great quarterbacks in the draft next year, then I think for the short-term pain of this isn't going to be much of a season, I think by next year, or at the very least the year after, to do it right, we could be talking about a team that's well placed to be extremely competitive for a long, long time. We've got to hit on the quarterback. So I think that's kind of what my position on it. And I'm prepared. I don't have faith that Carroll and Schneider are going to get this right. I don't have faith that they are. I mean, certainly don't have any faith that they're managing the cap situation right. And Robbie, you and I have talked about this. I think they've already wasted a load of money for next year, which people are still talking about. The Seahawks got millions to spend next year. They haven't. So there's already mistakes being repeated. And I'm fully prepared in 12 months, Adam, to be sat here saying, if I had any hair, I'd be tearing it out and saying what's going on. But right now, I'm prepared to sort of accept this season for what it's going to be, hope that things like the defense and the pass rush are going to improve, and that a young goal line can provide a foundation, and that the running game is going to be good, so that they can insert a quarterback and we could go on a bit of an adventure. And I do think there are some encouraging signs. Darrell Taylor is one. The talk of the two young cornerbacks, I mean, that's very exciting. It does feel a little bit like history's repeating there with Bryant and Woolen. And I'm intrigued to see the running game and the O-line. I say, I don't have faith that it's going to work out, but I'm realistic as to what my expectations can be this year. And if they mess this up over the next 18 months, I will call it out. But I feel personally I need to see them. I need to sort of judge what they do over the next 18 months, because no amount of complaining from my behalf is going to get Brian Daboll or whoever else in that hot seat week 1 against Denver.
I think the other thing too is they haven't, for a long time, they've, like you already said, they already messed up the cap space, and they've done a lot of things that are to make us say Pete and John aren't gonna, they aren't giving us a lot of faith. But they used to look at, like, you're seeing some good things out of the camp, like you said, with the running or with the cornerbacks. We got some talent now on the offensive line. Maybe there could be something there with the potential, and then with the potential of getting a possible franchise quarterback in next year's draft, because there are so many that are coming out that have the potential to be really, really good. It gives you a little bit of hope in the future to do something that we haven't done in a while, which is win the Super Bowl. Ultimately, that's all we want. All we want is the Super Bowl. That's what we want to do. And then we haven't been good enough with Russell Wilson at the helm. Now people are going to go back and say, is it Russell? Is it Pete? There's going to be there's always been that controversy. There's always going to be that who's going to win. The fact of the matter is we're with Pete now. This is what it is. Russell's gone. Now we got to try to find some shed of light, for what could come in the future. If not, then it's just going to be really kind of grim, right? So you got to have some sort of hope and that they're going to find the pieces that they need. Might not be with Pete and John. You never know. I mean, and Rob, I think you're right with the starts at the top with the ownership. And I think, we'll probably see Pete and John here until changes come there.
I think maybe my slight frustration comes with next year. They will have at their disposal 4 first-round picks to use if they want. Obviously, the 2 that they have in the draft, and they can use the 2 for the subsequent years that become available to them. And like what they've done in the draft is good. And I think we can probably rule out any idea they're going to be so bad that they're going to have their pick of the quarterbacks, because I can't see them being a top 5 pick at this stage unless Drew Lock and Geno Smith are so disastrous. So I find it a smidge disappointing that they're not seemingly looking to try and improve on the quarterback that they have. And again, this is probably short-termism, but Seahawk football has been so exciting for 10 years. And, Rob, we've discussed on my show the idea that, you spend all of Sunday, all of the week looking forward to being up till 5 o'clock in the morning to watch these guys. And then you, like a complete lunatic, will then write about them and stream about them. I mean, it's borderline unwell behavior, but we do it because we love it. And it's so much fun to watch. And I find it slightly depressing is an overly dramatic word, but you know what I'm saying, that there's no hope of winning this year because of who they have. And it wouldn't take an awful lot to bring someone in that, like, if Jimmy Garoppolo did become the quarterback, I don't feel like victory would be out of the question. And then if it works, then great, because we've won. But if it hasn't, if they love a guy so much, they're going to have to move up from the 12th pick that they have anyway. And they probably will throw loads of first round picks at it anyway. Like, I'm not advocating trading for Jimmy Garoppolo necessarily. I just find that the situation at quarterback, I find quite deflating, because everyone's saying this is not a bad team outside the quarterbacks. And there was a super chat that I'm sure we'll come to that was saying, is this the best set of skill positions outside the quarterback? And that's great, but it's a quarterback driven league. And there's a part of me that thinks that Pete's hubris that has developed in the last few years thinks that he can just trot anyone out. And if the running game's good and the defense is good, then, just 3-step drop and just pick up the open man. And I don't know, I kind of feel like we might end up falling flatter on our face than they think they might at this stage.
Adam mentioned it reflected some of the $5 super chat. Thank you for your support. Has there ever been a more talented set of offensive skill players in Seahawks history? I can't speak to answer that question. And somebody who has followed the Seahawks perhaps since day one might be able to answer that one better. If you want to chime in the comment section, maybe you can answer that. But it certainly isn't. I think it's a good-looking set of offensive skill players for sure, and with a lot of potential there. And Big Mike has got a $5 super chat for support. Thank you for those. If you want to send a super chat in, please do. I think I appreciate, Adam, you have brought to this discussion a very interesting talking point. And I do think, I've seen a lot of comments on Twitter almost dismissing the core. Oh, it's not interesting. The quarterback discussion is not, it's an irrelevance to have this year. It's not interesting. I think it's fascinating. And I think what you've mentioned there is one of the more fascinating things of this offseason. It's how they have approached this position. To move on from Russell Wilson, to speak of wanting to add more quarterbacks, or a quarterback or quarterbacks plural, even after trading Wilson and acquiring Drew Lock, and to have done nothing, to have not even brought in, another aging vet, to have not brought in another Geno Smith type, let's say, to have not brought in a rookie in the draft at all, not even a high pick, but a late round pick. There was nothing. They've not drafted anybody. There's nobody who they basically spent a bit of money on an undrafted free agent, and he lasted about 2 days, and then they binned him off. They've not done anything. And I find that somewhat interesting. And then there's the whole Baker Mayfield thing. They almost, as time went on, they pushed themselves further and distanced themselves further and further away from that. Garoppolo's out there, and I admitted that is a difficult one because it's the Niners. Like, if he was playing for the Browns or whatever, it might be easier to do because you could just ring them up and say, okay, let's do a deal. You can't do that with the Niners, and the Niners will be cautious of him ending up in Seattle. But I don't even know if they're particularly interested in it. And if they were, it's, you can't really acquire him on August the 30th when camp's finished and you're on the precipice of, I think that they could even wait till, I think it's like September the 10th or something, the Niners, to cut this guy. I mean, like, to miss all of camp and then to come in cold like that, that's not a recipe for success. So they've not done anything at this position. And that warrants a debate and a discussion as to whether it was the right thing. Because unless you are tanking and saying we embrace being a top 5 pick, and therefore we don't need to worry about anything, there will be a quarterback for us, we don't need to trade up, then any other scenario, whether you're picking 10th, 12th, 15th, 20th, you then are having to prepare yourself for an expensive trade up. And you can kind of argue, well, if the ambition is not to tank, then are you not at least better off doing, for example, what the Chiefs did, acquiring Alex Smith for a second-round pick, saying we're going to bide our time on this. We've got a stopgap. We might not be an elite team this year, but we can be competitive. And then if that quarterback is available in 2023, great. But in terms of Alex Smith, it was 4 years down the road until they actually found Patrick Mahomes, and then they traded up to get him, and they made sure they got the right guy. They don't have a plan like that. Seattle's plan is either to be, we don't care how good or bad we are this year. We're thinking quarterback next year, and we're just going to go with what we've got, and maybe they'll be crap and we won't even have to trade up. Or they genuinely believe in the people that they've got, which is hard to believe given it's Drew Lock and Geno Smith. So that is quite an interesting approach to how they've gone about it, and is one that we can criticize, because right now, in the immediate aftermath of moving on from Russell Wilson, they have not set the team up to be successful at the quarterback position. They have not done anything, and they were never really linked with Matt Ryan. They were tentatively linked with Deshaun Watson, and thank goodness they didn't go down that road, because imagine what the last few weeks would have been otherwise. And they've not done anything else. They've not, as far as we know, publicly gone after anybody. So what exactly is the plan? I can only assume, Robbie, that it's just to sort of, like I've said, just sort of endure a season and think that, well, Geno Smith is going to be perhaps the 2022 answer to 2011's Tavares Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. I think one of my fears, and this comes back to kind of what Adam was saying earlier about the coaching staff and everyone getting kind of just a pass, is I could see Pete Carroll being just hard-headed enough to say, I can win without Russell Wilson. Geno Smith is good enough, and I'm going to win with the running game, and we're going to play great defense, and Geno just needs to play, kind of point guard and lead this team and think it's good enough. I could see that being kind of a scenario where Pete's just hard-headed enough to think that, especially at 71 or 70, whatever he is, to think, is he going to waste another year? But he has the time, clearly, because Jody Allen's not going to move on from him. Like you said, I don't think anything's going to change until the team is sold. So yeah, it's possible that they're just looking for next year, but I could also see where he thinks he's got something in one of these two guys that'll be good enough to lead him to be competitive, because he has said they're planning on being competitive. We talked about the wording, right? We talked about the phrases that they used. It wasn't that, hey, we're retooling this year. It's that we're going to be competitive. We're not it's not a rebuild or a retool or anything like that. We're going to be competitive. That's what he has said.
I mean, it's also possible that they just believe Drew Lock is simply better and has a degree of talent that is superior to a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Baker Mayfield or anybody else they could have acquired. And we're just going through a process, and that in 3 weeks' time, Drew Lock will be given the starting job. And all along, they'll have just thought, we rate him better than a Jimmy G coming off shoulder surgery, a Baker Mayfield who, let's be fair, has had a fair bit of drama off the field, and a whole bunch of aging quarterbacks that they just simply feel he is better. But that will be all for naught if the incredibly bad Geno Smith ends up starting instead.
Yeah, I mean, I find the idea of the quarterback can just be a point guard and just distribute the ball to whoever he wants is quite funny, because if that was the case, then no one would ever spend $50 million on a quarterback. Because if it was that easy to just have a scheme where there's always someone open, and it's not like Pete's scheme is even that quarterback friendly. I mean, it never has been really. But the most interesting thing for me is that they keep harking on the fact that, well, hopefully this can be our 2012 to build into 2013. I mean, 2013 and the winning teams that the Seahawks had probably the best defense the franchise will ever have. Arguably the best running game the franchise will ever have, with the most expensive offensive line in the league and Marshawn Lynch. And if anyone can even scratch Marshawn Lynch, then fantastic. And they still required Russell Wilson to be a top 8, top 7 quarterback in the league to go all the way. Now, obviously, they're not looking at going all the way this year, but I do find it slightly reductive, the idea that, just build the defense and running game and then hope for some bang average quarterback play will be enough. I'm not sure that washes in the modern game, and it didn't even wash 10 years ago when we were the best team in the league.
Well, I suppose what you could argue with this is it won't be enough at quarterback, but will it be enough to set the table for the future? For example, if Geno Smith can go up to the line, and I know this is completely unexciting, if Geno Smith can go up to the line and just make a correct protection call and get the offensive lineman into the right position, and if he can allow the running game to thrive, and he can do just enough to, I wouldn't even call it a point guard, but if he can just complete a few third downs, let's say, or avoid massive issues. And I'm not saying Geno Smith will do that, because I don't think he's capable of doing even that. I think he's really bad. But I'm just saying that's if that is their hope, that he can just sort of get them through this, maybe that sort of understanding of the offense and experience can actually be of benefit, and that guidance to Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, Kenneth Walker, Rashad Penny, so that when it gets to next year and they try to insert a young quarterback, let's say, they're actually joining a good environment where they've got a running game and O-line and some receivers and some tight ends to throw to. And although I agree with you, yeah, in 2013, they obviously had a legendary defense and they had Marshawn Lynch, and they're never going to be able to do that again. They're never going to be able to do that again. But I suppose you could even argue, do they need to do it again? Do they need to be one of the greatest teams ever built to succeed in a similar way? So if they can rush the passer, and again, I have no faith, I have no confidence that they will be able to, because I've watched the last few years. But let's say Darrell Taylor, Uchenna Nwosu, and Boye Mafe have a good year, and they show promise for the future, then the defense might be able to be okay. It might actually show some promise to where we're sitting at the end of the season going, okay, it wasn't a great season, but hey, do you know what? Maybe we'll feel about Boye Mafe what we feel about Darrell Taylor now, that he's ready to maybe take another step, or that Uchenna Nwosu is, not an elite player, but is if he gets 7.5 sacks, for example, that's better than like the guys that he's replaced. If maybe he gets 10, I don't know, but it's, there's that. And if Jordan Brooks can take a step forward, and if young cornerbacks who, again, I've not personally seen them, so I can't pass comment, but everybody who's watched them is really excited. Maybe they can have at least something, the makings of a good team. If not an elite team, maybe the makings of a good team, and that's not too bad. And the only other thing I would suggest, and I'd be interested in what you guys think about this, I mean, I think Pete Carroll probably thinks he's got about 3 years left, realistically. And he probably likes the idea of riding off into the sunset. And he probably sees this as a rebuild whereby just as the rebuild is peaking, he can then win something and ride off into the sunset as a hero. I mean, that's how he will be viewing this thing. And I think he's already, and again, I have no insider knowledge on this. This is just a hunch on my behalf. I think he's already started to see some control, either because he's been told to, or because he sees the future is, for him, is not for long. I think the fact that they are basically running Vic Fangio's defense or talking about it is a sign that he's doing something that I've called for, I think we all have, for a long, long time, which is for him to become more of a figurehead rather than an all-powerful, we're going to run everything that I want. Because Pete Carroll 5 years ago ain't running Vic Fangio's defense, is he? And the fact that Clint Hurt's there and talking the way that he is with extreme confidence, and the people they brought in, they go and get a defensive coordinator from Chicago, basically to be a secondary coach and assistant to the defensive coordinator. That to me is a big move, which suggests that Pete is sort of saying, we're transitioning to the future that doesn't include me, and I'm just going to be the sort of the Nick Saban type here. And again, we'll see with the offense, but the fact that they got rid of Mike Solari and gave Shane Waldron's guy the offensive coordinator job with an idea of doing everything that Shane Waldron wants to do, again, at least lends itself to the idea that maybe this is going to be more McVay, Waldron type concepts on the offense and with the O-line protections and stuff like that in the running game than it was the Pete Carroll way of doing things, which is all very encouraging to me. Now, when we're 6 weeks into the season, if we're still seeing the same things we've always seen, I reserve the right to come back on a stream like this and say I was completely wrong about that. But I'm willing to sort of at least be open-minded to the possibility that Carroll is at least saying, I know I'm only in this for another 2 or 3 years. I'm going to lead, but we need to think about the future. And I think potentially they're lining up Clint Hurt to be the successor, whether that's within a year, 2 years, 3 years, because everything you see from Clint Hurt is sort of promoting, and they did a whole episode of their behind the scenes thing on Clint Hurt, which makes it seem sort of like they're pushing him a little bit. And I have to say, from what I've heard of Clint Hurt so far, I like the guy. I think he's impressive. He's an impressive speaker. Doesn't mean he can coordinate a defense. We'll see. But I think the way that he speaks, I mean, as a coach said anything that you can remember in the last decade as good as, we do not want our pass rushers going backwards anymore. He basically just hammered what they were doing last year and reassured everybody in the process that they're going to do things differently, which is great. But I think that's encouraging. I think it is encouraging, even though I understand why people may feel a little less optimistic as me about that.
Yeah. Do you think sorry, Robbie, do you think this is a genuine question. This is going to sound like a snarky question, but it's not. Has it happened before whereby we've heard this idea that there's going to be dramatic changes in various aspects of the team, and we've ended up in November thinking, well, this looks rather familiar to what we're used to? Because I certainly feel like that's happened offensively. I probably don't know enough about the defensive side of the game to know whether that's the case. Robbie, you'll be much more clued in than I will.
Yeah, last year. I mean, right when we brought in Shane Waldron, that was the first thing that people talked about is how different the offense is going to look. And I think we saw it that first week against the Colts, right? We saw a lot of shift in the line, shifting wide receivers around, people going to motion a lot more. It looked very different, but it didn't take very long. Week 2, we saw none of that, and it changed dramatically. And I think that, that was kind of one of the things we had talked about. Like, it looked way different. And at least in my opinion, again, I was at that game. So just, sitting in 300 level, looking down, it looked like it was a different offense the way it was ran. I don't think I've seen it really with the defense at all. But I mean, I think there was some change though when we talked about going from who did we? Actually, I can't remember when we dropped a couple offensive coordinators when he fired both and brought up new guys. It seemed like there would maybe be some change. But last year, definitely we had talked about during the offseason, the season will run if Pete lets Shane Waldron run how he wants to run, and it didn't seem like it went that way.
It's a fair point, and there's definitely, I will absolutely concede that I can say all of this now that Pete's going to take a little bit of a step back and trust his coaches a bit more. I completely concede that 3 games into the season, Pete might go, oh, why don't we go back to doing this? Because you're right. Adam, it's a perfect example of he has done that before. And the other example is the whole let Russ cook thing at the start of 2020, where they played a certain way for 5 games, and then at the first sign of trouble, reverted back to a Pete Carroll brand of football. And that might happen again. It might be that they play Vic Fangio's defense until they don't. And it might be that they run Shane Waldron's offense again until they don't. Completely understand that might happen. But I don't know. It just feels a little bit to me like the right thing to do right now is to see some football, is to sort of see how this plays out. And I think the track record of this channel and of Seahawks Draft Blog and the three of us having a conversation is if something isn't right, we'll talk about it. But I want to see it right now. I want to see what it all looks like before sort of passing judgment on it and not assuming that it's gonna go this way again, even though it might do.
Yeah, and they're not really setting themselves up to run a very strong offense. If they're running Geno Smith and Drew Lock out there, they might have to run the football a lot anyway. So it's going to be Pete's way anyway. So I don't know how much Shane Waldron will have a huge say in how it's going to run with the quarterback situation.
The offseason's just too long, really, isn't it? There's just too much time to sit and fester on information. I mean, Russell Wilson was traded half a year ago when they end up running out for that first game, and you've got 6 months of wondering what they're going to look like, and is it going to be Jacksonville Geno or Pittsburgh or New Orleans Geno? I mean, I do wonder if that Jacksonville game wasn't against Jacksonville, or if it had never happened at all, how different those that are positive may be feeling about the idea that the quarterback is fairly dispensable, because I mean that obviously was a time where Geno looked pretty good, but the games before against New Orleans and Pittsburgh, I mean it was dirge, wasn't it? To be honest.
Yeah, I won't even accept that he looked good against Jacksonville. I kind of get the feeling that if Clipboard Jesus would have rolled out there, then he might have been able to find a game against Jack. I mean that was at the peak of Urban Meyer's meltdown in Jacksonville. I mean, they were an embarrassment to the NFL last season, and there was a rookie quarterback. They were there to be beaten and comfortably, and they were. Against actual NFL teams, Geno Smith looked offensive. It was hard to watch, and it will. I did a little video the other day, which I want to see Drew Lock start. I really hope. I don't want them just to give Drew Lock the job, but I want him to win the job, because I want to go into a Seahawks game in week 1 wondering what's going to happen. I think there'll just be a little bit of mystery, a little bit of intrigue that will not exist if Geno Smith trots out onto that field. It will be awful to watch. He is a thoroughly boring player. He's a bad, boring player. You can be, I suspect Drew Lock is a bad, interesting player in that he will produce some explosive, exciting moments and some plays that just have us with our head in our hands throughout the season. But that, to me, will be more entertaining than just watching crap football every single offensive series, which is what Geno Smith's going to provide. He is just not good. He is 31 years old. He has a horrendous touchdown to interception ratio. He has started more games than people realize in his career and has shown nothing. He wouldn't be in the league, in my opinion, if it wasn't for the Seahawks. So I don't want to see any more of that. And when he said the other day, if I win the job or not, I've got Drew's back, I thought, fantastic. So there's not even going to be any issues there when he's the backup. So just give Drew Lock the job and let's at least see what he can do. Because that, to me, is more interesting than watching Geno Smith, because he's bad. And if there's anybody out there, and I know I've read a few tweets, because we're at that point now where, people on Seahawks Twitter are pontificating again and giving their lengthy proclamations as to what they think we need to hear. The masses must hear. And I've seen a little bit of talk that, well, Geno can do this and Geno can do that, and who cares? Well, I think that rhetoric will change pretty quickly once they've watched 3 or 4 games of Geno Smith, if that proves to be the case.
Yeah, there was a chat in here that just makes, I said it last week and I said it kind of like tongue in cheek and kind of joking, but someone said, if we finish 1-7, don't worry, we'll make a desperate trade. And that is legitimately one of my fears coming into this upcoming season. Starting horrible, thinking that they were going to do better, and that they go and make a desperate trade, trading, future draft capital for someone who really isn't going to come in and help us all that much, and blowing an opportunity to draft that quarterback of the future. That's legit my biggest fear. And I hope that doesn't happen.
So that's interesting, because Robbie, you mentioned 20 minutes or so ago that Pete said, this isn't a retool, this isn't a rebuild. We're going to try and win. And that obviously sounds great to the cameras. You've probably never played this game, but we have a legendary soccer management game over here called Football Manager. And at the start of every season, you have to go to the board and lay out what your objectives are for the coming season. And if you don't meet those objectives, you stand to lose your job at the end of the season. What do you both think that Pete Carroll would have been clicking on the Football Manager equivalent? I mean, do you reckon he's actually gone to Jody Allen and said, "Don't worry, we're going to win this year"? Because I can't see it, but I'd love to know what you guys think would be his like objectives for the season with the big bosses.
I think he would have clicked the avoid relegation button. For people who understand Football Manager. By the way, that's a great point. Why the hell is there not like an answer to Football Manager in America for the NFL? That would be so good.
Okay, I'll be honest. I've played it. I have played that game. They have it on Steam. I'm a big gamer, by the way. So yes, I've played that game, and I'll tell you, I lost real fast. I got fired real quick. So
no, you could just save it and then go back and play the game again.
Yeah.
I mean,
but what do you reckon?
I genuinely think. I imagine he's been told, don't worry about record this year. I imagine that's what they've said, or that he's, they will have had to have had an honest conversation. Which, if we're trading Russell Wilson, like I imagine there'll have been a meeting between Burt Cold, Jody Allen, John Schneider, and Pete Carroll, and maybe Chuck Arnold or whoever else would have been in that kind of meeting, where they said, "Okay, are we doing this then? Are we all fine? We're going to push the button on the trade. If we do this, we have to accept this is going to be a rebuild and that this isn't going to be a winning season." I cannot imagine any other scenario where they have not all on board with the idea that this could be a challenge. And Pete Carroll's just said what Pete Carroll was always going to say, that we're going to try and compete, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But ultimately, they know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah,
I think they'll win 6 games. By the way, I think Pete Carroll's never won fewer than. Was it 7 games?
7.
Even when Russell Wilson's finger fell off and they had Tavares Jackson and Charlie Whitehurst and they inherited an expansion franchise, they've always won 7 games. So, I mean, 6 and 7 games, I just get the feeling they will find a way, come high or high water, to win that many games again, whoever plays.
Yeah, I think where they probably had the conversation right when they were deciding whether or not they were going to trade Russ. And, and it came down pretty quickly, right? Aaron Rodgers decided to stay in Green Bay. That same day, Russell got traded to Denver. I think Denver was always the top choice. I think they had that in their mind. This was going to happen, depending on what Aaron Rodgers does. And I think they just had that conversation and said, hey, if Russ is gone, this is going to be a rebuild. This is going to be a little more challenging. We'll see what the draft holds, as far as quarterbacks go. But I think after they did their evaluation of quarterbacks, they probably realized, let's just see what we got in Drew Lock and Geno Smith. And I don't think there's any way that they could have looked at this and said, we're going to win this year. There's no way.
The final record's fascinating because you could look at last year and say that, well, the number of times that Russell basically, Pete is very happy to play it out and keep it close. Can you win a game in the, I don't need to repeat the phrase that we've heard a billion times, but a part of that is basically meaning that the big players have to make the big plays at the time. Otherwise you probably lose. And we've been blessed by having, I've seen there's been some criticism about Russ in the comments, and perhaps that's fair. But one thing you have to say for him is that from a clutch standpoint, when it mattered, the number of games he pulled out of the bag when it looked like a loss was there are, unquestionable. And it's interesting to me because I think that the roster is potentially a 7 or 8 win roster, but when Geno Smith had to do something with the game on the line, he fumbled it once and threw a pick on the other time. And just by having a weaker player with the way that Pete wants to play, it wouldn't stun me if they ended up only winning 3 games, because 4 of them they could have won, whereas they would have won them with a superstar play in the last minute from the best player. They're now relying on a bum to do it. And that's what, for me, makes the record quite an interesting thing, because I think it could be as bad as that and potentially as good as 8, maybe.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because, we're kind of in unknown territory, and I'm not just talking about the Seahawks. Like, when's the last time a team traded a quarterback in his supposed prime years? But I'm going to come on to Wilson to finish and rebuild. I mean, that just doesn't happen. I can't remember a similar scenario to this. The Seahawks are somewhat unique in that regard, and I must admit it has been quite exciting to have the sort of the draft to talk about this year and to look ahead and to be able to interview Will Levis, check that interview out and do stuff like that again. And the thing is in 12 months' time, you will have lost, or well, you won't have lost necessarily. You will have invested everything from that trade, and that's when you've got to produce. And that's kind of how I'm viewing it. Once the fallout from the trade is complete and we know what Denver's got and what Seattle's got out of this, then it's going to be interesting. And we're not going to know the answer to that for probably 18 months, if not longer. But at least in a year, we'll know this is what Seattle used its stock on. This is what it has to do. But I am intrigued by the quarterbacks in the draft. For me, if you ended up with the same record as last year, which was 7-10, and they still had the 10th overall pick, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that there will be a quarterback with the 10th overall pick next year that you can really like. If the media is correct, and I'm not convinced, I said this to Robbie, I think off air last week, that for me, Will Levis and Tyler Van Dyke are 1 and 2, QB1 and QB2, and Young and Stroud are 3 and 4. But the media has Young and Stroud as 1 and 2 in whatever order, and then some have Levis still as a top 10 pick, and it's a mixed bag on Van Dyke. But I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that you could get a quarterback at 10. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that Denver's going to be crap this year. I mean, I just want to come on to that. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this. People have been talking about it in the chat, and I will share this article now so that you can see it. If you haven't read it, you can see this now. So this is from the Fan 104.3 FM. Now, I don't know whether they are the official, they're essentially what 710 is, or whether they're, the KJR version, which has not got a contract with Denver, and therefore they might be more inclined to be critical. I'm not sure. But if given a dose of truth serum, anyone who has watched the Broncos at training camp this year would probably admit something few will voluntarily utter out loud. Russell Wilson has been underwhelming. It's not that Denver's new quarterback has been bad. He hasn't been. It's just that he hasn't been fantastic either. There haven't been any moments that have made the fans in attendance ooh and ah with excitement. There haven't been many plays that made the media members in attendance race to get out the first tweet. There haven't been many instances where it felt distinctly different from previous training camps where journeymen were playing quarterback instead of a future Hall of Famer. Now, it goes on to say, in fairness, that he had one of those plays, that day, and people are a lot more positive about where he is now. But I don't know. I mean, it's at least to me, it's possible that maybe the Seahawks have got out of this at the right time, that Wilson has just missed games for the first time in his career, that maybe he's not as good as he thinks, and that he's still good, but maybe he is susceptible to injuries. He's playing in the AFC West, which is a loaded division. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that Denver aren't actually that good next year. And if he has an injury again, they could just be the Seahawks last year. And you could suddenly end up with 2 very high picks. I don't know, this is all wishful thinking. And people like Colin Coward expect Denver to be legitimate Super Bowl candidates, and they may well be. But Russell Wilson hasn't been a Super Bowl candidate for a while at quarterback. He hasn't been able to sort of elevate Seattle. I don't think Denver's roster is as good as some people think. It's not ridiculous to me that the Seahawks could end up with 2 top 15 picks and then would position themselves in a really good place to take a big step forward. Whether it's a big enough step forward, whether they'd use the picks correctly or not, I'm not sure. But I do think, in fairness to them, they had a good draft this year.
I've said this prior, and I'm gonna say it again. The Denver Broncos will go as far as Javonte Williams, and that defense takes him. It's not going to rely on Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson will do one thing that he's done well in the past, as Adam had pointed out. He wins in the fourth quarter, but he's also in the NFC or AFC West, which is the toughest division. I don't know if he's going to be able to win that division. I mean, I know, for a long time, people would say the NFC West was, the toughest division with how well the Niners defense played and the Rams, and even the Cardinals, playing the stuff. And there was a lot of that, but I think this is a different beast. I think you're going against teams that have quarterbacks in place to play really, really well and keep Russell off the field. But I think, that for me, I think for Denver to win, it's going to go as far as Javonte Williams and that defense takes him. I don't think it's going to be relying on Russ. Just my personal opinion.
I wonder if there's more of a tribalistic way that I support my team than some Americans, because I ended up in a bit of a Twitter spat on Sunday evening with some Americans who were saying that, how dare you even think to boo Russell Wilson? Like, of course he wanted out. I mean, who can blame him for wanting out? I mean, look at the Seahawks. He should be applauded. I mean, I hope when he comes back, he gets a cacophony of 70,000 boos and someone puts a helmet in every single place they can possibly stick one, to be honest. I hope he gets the doors blown off. I hope he gets absolutely battered. But perhaps that comes from seeing some soccer players transferred away and it feeling that way. Because as far as I'm aware, Russell Wilson decided to leave my team. And as much as I have a huge issue with a lot of things going on in my team, the team is still number one, and someone wanting to leave my team pisses me off.
So can I just ask though, Adam, how did this conversation start? Did you just announce on Twitter that you would boo?
No, it didn't. It was, and perhaps I was slightly over the top. But I think Sue Bird had a retirement video in Seattle on Sunday, and Russell Wilson, very kindly, in fairness, and I probably, as a 34-year-old, should know better. Russell Wilson did a VT for this, and apparently it got booed at Climate Pledge Arena, and I just thought that was the most fantastic thing. But it appears that perhaps some fans stateside don't exactly agree and think it was classless.
Well, I'm with you, Adam. Listen,
give the guy hell. He chose to leave the team. Fuck him. Sorry, fuck my language.
That's the demonetization we were looking for.
Sorry.
I love it when Adam gets fired up.
Well, here's the thing, right? So, I agree with you, because as much as I appreciate Russell Wilson and what he did for Seattle, and great and a Super Bowl and all of the great excitement he provided, sports is you can't be too nice. Like, I don't want the Seahawks to be too nice. I don't want Russell Wilson to trot out at Lumen Field and everybody be giving one of these polite claps. Like someone you're watching some at a country club in South England. Like, oh yes, hello Russell, welcome back. Like, I don't want that. This is supposed to be an intimidating place to come and play. Make some noise. You can shake hands with him afterwards. Russell, sorry about the booing, but it's got to be done. There can be a bit of that afterwards, but you've got to. He's moved on. He doesn't play for the Seahawks anymore. Boo every quarterback that comes to Seattle. I don't care.
Yeah, and he's sure, like I said last week, he's sure making it easy to dislike him more with the "let's ride."
Well, that's it. Everybody should be going, "Let's ride" every time something goes wrong. By the way, Adam, we have to ask you about the "let's ride" thing. As someone who has been very critical of his decisions, where to go on holiday, where to be photographed, what to wear, what to say, what do you make of "let's ride"?
I think, as I've said to you for a number of years, like, Russell Wilson has tried so hard to curate a brand for himself that he doesn't actually have a brand. And I think, if anything, the proof of that pudding is the fact that someone could just jump from catchphrase to catchphrase. I mean, it'd be like Nike just deciding that, to get rid of the tick and just do it is no longer their slogan, and that they'll do something else. I mean, if anything could sum up the fact that you basically are just a brandless entity, I think it's that. I mean, on the play thing, just to go back to something slightly more normal and actually on topic of conversation. I heard someone on Seattle radio saying that, and this is someone that was fervently against giving Wilson a new contract. He was saying, I can't believe it. Like the 15-yard out passes just not being complete anymore, like they were with Russell Wilson. And like, well, yeah, that's kind of why you pay a guy a lot of money. And I do wonder if maybe training camp and non-competitive football is not the kind of place where you're going to see the best out of Russell Wilson, because I feel like the oohs and ah plays inevitably come with someone in his face that's trying to hurt him quite badly, and he pulls a rabbit out the hat. And I wonder if training camp mentality isn't that conducive for that, and perhaps he's the kind of guy that will look better in games than he will do in practice. I mean, I hope not. I hope he loses every game. I actually hope for something else, but I probably wouldn't say that publicly on a show. But again, that's probably my English tribalism coming through, given the fact that we have their first round pick. I hope he doesn't win any games, however that comes about. But yeah, I wonder if maybe he'll step up to the plate when it's game time and not in practice.
Well, I'm a small man, and I want to bring it back to Let's Ride very quickly. So I think this is the thing with it. I mean, when he did the Go Hawks thing in Seattle, it actually felt like it kind of got you pumped up that he was in there, this young maverick quarterback, go see Top Gun Maverick, and he was there, and he was just, all in, and he sounded like too good to be true. And then he'd finish with the Go Hawks, and you could relate to that. As Seahawks fans, you were like, oh, he's talking about my team. He wants to be here. This is great. And then it was just something that he always did. And you never really thought, it wasn't even so much a catchphrase, really. It was just something he did at the end of press conferences. But this is legitimately, like, he's actually put thought into, I can't do Go Hawks anymore. I need something else. And no other quarterback has done that. I mean, think of any other quarterback. How much time do you think Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen think about, I need a new catchphrase? And then to do it in this way, I mean, look, again, I'm not trying to discredit Russell or anything he's done for this team. And if he was still in Seattle, I'd be cheering him on. But if I was a Broncos fan, this Broncos country, let's ride, would be setting off massive alarm bells for me. Because this is he does come across as somebody now who is a brand, or trying to be a brand. Like you say, Adam, he's not even accomplished that. He wants to be like LeBron and Tiger Woods and have his own clothing range and have marketing, coming out of his eyeballs. He wants all of that. And what he actually all is a crap, cringe catchphrase that's making him a bit of a meme and a laughing stock on the internet.
I mean, it takes some going for the fact that I almost support the Seahawk regime more because of it than I would do otherwise. I mean, I don't think I've had a particularly good word to say about Pete and John, or Pete in particular, for the couple of years that I've been coming on this show. And yet there's part of me now that thinks, well, the way that Wilson has sort of acted on in the last couple of years with that, I almost am desperate for the Pete thing to succeed, because it will sort of show Russell Wilson up. And then I actually not sure if I want that, because I'm pissed off about the head coaching situation. I'm in a vicious cycle, Rob, and I don't know how to get out of it.
Well, unfortunately, Adam, I do think that you're going to stay in that vicious cycle for a little while. I think Russ will probably be just fine in Denver, and the Let's Ride thing will hopefully calm down. But I mean, it is the off season, so we got a lot of shenanigans to talk about. And as you said, the off season just seems too long, so it's easy to pick apart things. As soon as games start getting played, we'll be talking about other things, and we'll be right back to being pissed off about John.
Absolutely,
yeah.
But can I just say one final thing on this, right? What makes it worse is that if he did it with a smile and was like, hey, Broncos country, let's ride. If he did like that, people would be like, oh, Russell, you lovable chap. But it's the fact that he does it as if he's trying to seduce somebody. Hey, Broncos country, let's ride. It's like, no, you're not cool enough to pull it off. You're not Samuel L. Jackson in a film, Russ. You just sound awkward. It sounds forced. It sounds unnatural. Smile, have a bit of fun with it if you're going to do it. I mean, it's just, I don't know. But I do.
Have you seen Keenan Allen mocking it at Chargers camp?
I've watched all of those videos. I am addicted to people taking the piss out of Let's Ride. Anyway, I think we're just about there. I mean, I don't know. Is there anything else that we're kind of not talking? I kind of feel like we've covered most things, and I'm, thank you to everybody who's been. It's been a very active chat, and great to see how many people have been with us throughout this live stream. Given that we are still weeks away from the new season, I mean, is there anything that could happen? Let's finish with this. Is there anything that could happen maybe in the next couple of weeks that could generate some excitement for you to go into the new season? I'll take that as a no.
The thing, I mean, what can happen in basic, like as a podcaster calls it, sort of Civil War reenactment, which is what the next 3 weeks is. This isn't real battle. I mean, obviously they could make a trade for a quarterback that could, let's say, someone better than Kirk Cousins, for example, who you could argue if the ball falls the right way up a few more times than it doesn't, potentially could lead you into a decent playoff Super Bowl run. I can't think of anything that can happen in just games and practice that we could hear that would fire us up beyond where we already are. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't, unless there's some trade for a quarterback. But again, I think even if they traded for a quarterback, someone, as you said, just a step up from Kirk Cousins, I'd be pissed because they'd be like, why did you trade away draft capital? But with the quarterbacks that are coming down in this next year's draft, I think I would ultimately kind of be frustrated by whatever they gave up. But yeah, I don't know if there's much I could say. The only thing that could change in the next couple of weeks is when we get to week 1 and we win in Denver, or win against Denver at home on Monday night. That would be if that's the only game we win, I'm okay with it. I want to win that game, period.
Imagine winning that game and then enduring 16 consecutive losses.
Right, yeah.
Imagine that.
I mean, I don't want that, obviously. I'd rather see us win more. But yeah, I definitely want to win that game. But there's not much more. I mean, I'm excited to see how some of the young guys play. But I don't think it's going to go beyond anything that's going to get me so excited that I'm like,
Well, if all the talk about Russell Wilson and the way he speaks and everything like that, I'll plug it again one last time. Go and check out the Will Levis interview on the channel, because that is a quarterback who, has got none of that. I mean, he talks in a very human, relatable way, and I thought what he had to say was quite interesting, and I think worth getting to know him because he is somebody I can imagine the Seahawks being very interested in. He ticks a lot of boxes for what the Seahawks look for. So I won't be surprised if they've got their eye on him in particular ahead of the draft next year. And frankly, if I have to wait and endure, a few months of bad QB play to get him, you might be able to convince me that was all worth it in the end. Anyway, I'd
agree with that.
Robbie,
the interview with him was fantastic. If you guys haven't seen it, do it please, because it's awesome. Will Levis is the guy. He's it.
Can I say one thing I've really found interesting about YouTube is I can just talk bollocks for 10 minutes and we'll get twice as many views as an interview with Will Levis. I just don't understand. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Please, I even posted in that video, hey, if you're here, go and check out the Will Levis video. And go and check it out. It's much more interesting listening to him than me. So go on.
Rob, if it's any consolation, we did an 1.5 hour long podcast with a Seahawk captain from this season, and on the official UK Seahawk fan Facebook group, someone having a green hat in Sainsbury's got 6 times as many likes as that podcast did. So maybe that's a reflection on my broadcasting abilities, but I think probably we're all in the same boat on that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that is a crazy group, though, let's be honest. That is a very out there cast of characters, let's say. So I will not pin any blame on that on you, Adam. But look, on that sour note, let's finish and check out Will Levis's interview. Check out their interview with Nick Ballore. Check it all out. It's very, very interesting. It's all great content and with a British style to it as well. So there you go. Adam, thank you for spending an hour with us, given that you have a new arrival. Much appreciated. And also for creating such an interesting talking point for us today. Robbie, always great to speak to you. Thank you to everybody who's been active in the live chat. Thank you for the super chats as well. We'll be back very soon. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out Adam's podcast as well, the Pedestrian Podcast. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel and everything else that you need to do for the algorithm. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye for now.